Hello and welcome to the first episode of the JavaScript Zero to Hero series. In this series, we are going to go over a large majority of JavaScript tips, tricks, and things to turn you into a code guru. These videos will be a little bit longer than the past ones, as we will be covering a lot more stuff, starting off with some history. The year is 1993 and a brand new web browser gets released, Mosaic. It has a graphical user interface to navigate the web, and it's built to be used by non-technical user. This was some truly cutting-edge stuff at the time. It had a big impact on making the World Wide Web more accessible. Soon after, a few chaps from Mosaic jumped ship to start their own company called Netscape Corporation. They decided to take the idea of the graphical user interface browser to the next level, creating a more polished version of the Mosaic browser known as the Navigator. Navigator took the world by storm and very quickly became the most used browser. During these early days of the internet, web pages were static, as all they had to use was hypertext markup language, aka HTML. While this was revolutionary at the time, with the rise in popularity of the internet, people were very quickly growing tired of static pages and wanted something more dynamic and a bit more interactive. So in 1995, Netscape decided to add a scripting language to the Netscape Navigator. They took two different approaches to achieving this. Number one, they collaborated with Sun Microsystems to embed the Java programming language into the Navigator, while at the same time hiring Brendan Eich to embed Scheme. Scheme is a programming language created in the 1970s, clearly cutting-edge technology by trying to add it to the browser in the 90s. At this time, Sun Microsystems' Java programming language was extremely popular, as they had spent a lot of time and money on marketing their language, something most other programming languages would never have done. So Netscape decided to not use the Java programming language in their browser. Instead, they quickly decided the best option was to get Brendan Eich to create a Java-like language. At this point, they told him he had 10 days to get a prototype up and running, which is mind-blowing in its own, creating an entire language in just 10 days. The instructions were clear. Make it look like Java so it would be more likely for Java developers to learn the new language. Initially, the language and its interpreter were called LiveScript at launch. Netscape wanted to jump on the hype train that Sun Microsystems had already created and changed the name from LiveScript to JavaScript. This caused a bit of confusion, as people think JavaScript and Java are somehow related. However, not at all, made by two completely different companies and run in two very different environments. In 1996, Netscape submitted JavaScript to the European Computer Manufacturers Association, also known as ECMA. This is a non-profit organization for setting standards in all things computers. After some time, this led to a standardization of the web language, which was released in 1997 as ECMAScript. There was a lot of back and forth between Microsoft and ECMA regarding the language, as Microsoft had reverse engineered the JavaScript Navigator interpreter and created their own language called JScript, which did have some differences. So the same code would not always run the same on Netscape Navigator as it did on Microsoft's Explorer browser. Much deliberation later, we now have ECMAScript 2023, also known as ES14 or ECMAScript 14th edition. ECMAScript sets the specifications and JavaScript conforms to those, as JavaScript was essentially the de facto web language, thus had to be backwards compatible with all previous versions. This did lead to some issues, as we'll see a bit later. But alas, here we are, and that concludes the history lesson. Now on to the fun stuff, setting ourselves up to start learning JavaScript. While you can use any programs you wish, I will be leaving links in the description for the ones that I personally use. First, we need a code/text editor. My editor of choice is Visual Studio Code, also known as VS Code. You can head to Google and search for Visual Studio Code, or follow the link in the description. Once you are on the site, code.visualstudio.com, click on the Download for Windows button. If you are using macOS or Linux, click on the arrow and choose your operating system version. Once the download completes, read through all the T's and C's like everyone obviously does. Choose I accept the agreement and click Next. Next, choose where to install VS Code. I will be keeping it as the default install path, so click Next. Choose if you wish to change the Start Menu folder location, or if you don't wish to create a Start Menu folder. I am leaving these as defaults. At this point, please ensure that the below two options are checked. Register code as an editor for supported file types. Add to path requires shell restart. You can choose any of the other options if you wish. You can also add the path later or choose to not use code as the default. However, as this is an introduction, this is the path of least resistance. Click Install and wait for the installation to complete. Visual Studio Code is now installed. We are almost ready to start coding. Let's make the last few changes to VS Code. This is what you should see once you open VS Code. Don't be intimidated, we will go through the basics in due time. First, we need to add an extension to VS Code that is going to make our coding experience much better. First, click on File, then on Open Folder. Now, choose the location on the left where you wish to save your project. You can right-click on any empty space in the window, choose New, choose Folder, and call it Projects or Code, anything you wish to call it. Once you have selected the folder, VS Code will open the project there. Any files you create in VS Code will now be in that folder. But before we can begin coding, let's add the extension. VS Code is highly customizable and has thousands of extensions to add all kinds of functionality. However, as we are learning JavaScript, we only want to use one. On the left-hand pane, there are 5 buttons. Click on the last one, the 3 blocks with one separate. This is in the extension tab. Once there, type in live server and click on the live server result as shown. Now just click on the highlighted install button and you're done. The setup has been completed. We are now ready to rock and we can start our first lesson in JS and make it do a thing. Now we will start by creating 2 files. One is an HTML file, the next is a JavaScript file. Just to round off this video, I would like us to at least write one line of code to reach that ever-elusive sense of accomplishment. So let's begin by creating the HTML page first. All we have to do is go over here to this little icon. This will create a new file. Once there, just type in index.html. This will then open up in the code editor. HTML files consists of 3 different sections. First, we have the HTML. This essentially encapsulates everything on the page and signifies to the browser that this is indeed a web page. Inside the HTML tag, we have 2 main sections. First, we have the head. This houses all the metadata about the file, such as the character set for the language it's in, links to style sheets, and JavaScript files. No need to worry, we will go over all this stuff as we go. Next, we have the body section. This will house all the content for the page. This is essentially the bit that the user will actually see. Now, let's create that JavaScript file. Once again, click on the new file icon. In this case, we're going to call it the same as the HTML file, so we'll say index.js. Now we have the files required to start. However, the HTML file doesn't know that the JavaScript file exists at this point. What we need to do is reference the JavaScript file in the HTML file. To do this, all we need to do is use the script tag and use the src or source attribute to point to the index.js file. So what we're going to do is we're going to click here on the index.html file. Then inside the head tags here, we are going to add a script tag. So we are going to go script, then we put src equals, and you'll see it automatically adds the double quotes. So all we have to do is put dot / and you'll see it shows the index.js file. So you can just click on that or hit enter and then just close that tag and it'll automatically create the closing tag. Don't worry if a lot of the stuff doesn't make sense to you quite yet. We will definitely go more in depth on all these kinds of things. Now that this is done, we're going to go back to the index.js file. We're going to write console.log, open parentheses, double quotes, hello world. Just remember to go to the end and add your semicolons. Now all we have to do is save the file. All you have to do is hit Ctrl and S and it will automatically save the file. Now that the code is done, but where exactly do we see this? Well, this is where that extension that we installed earlier comes in handy. In the bottom right, you will see a button that says Go Live. So let's just click on that button. This is going to open your default browser. Now this could be Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Opera, however, most of them should work roughly the same way anyway. However, we did write that code, but we're still not seeing anything. That's because we logged it to the console. Just right click anywhere on the page. You will see the inspect option here. Once that opens up, you will see a whole bunch of things that you may never have seen before. This is essentially the back end of the web page. You can actually see the HTML and all sorts of other stuff that's very daunting at first, but don't worry, you will get very intimate with this in no time. All we have to do is just go up here and look for the console. Once we click on console, you will see there it says hello world. You have officially written some code. Good job. Just to make this a little bit more fun, if you go back to VS Code and instead of hello world, you can put anything you would like. So in this case, let's say howdy partners. Click save, and if you go back to your browser, you will see it would have updated. Nice. And once again, just to end off the video, I would just like to say thank you everyone for all the support and suggestions. If there's any topic or questions that you may have, feel free to put them down in the comments and we can go over them in a follow-up video. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, congratulations, you have leveled up in programming.